The Museum Roadshow is brought to you by Carvinens.
Let's go to Lake and Highway 10. There was another station there, and that was that had that different architecture too. It had a door to the east and a door to the north instead of parallel like most service stations had. That was run by Kenneth Engelbretson and Cheney, and that's where Cheney got his start in repairing automobiles. Let's go down a half a block, and that's where Big Five Co-op was. That was run by Dave Seberg, and sadly they had a big fire there. Well, Big Five and the city council couldn't get together on how they could rebuild that station. There'll be more about that later on. Well, if we go diagonally northwest across the street, we have Sauer Brothers. And there was Roy and Joe, and they had an interesting station. That was a log cabin, and they sold minnows down in the basement. They were in business with their dad and in the oil business for a long time. If we go to the corner of Summit and 10, we have another Texaco station. Well, right where part of R&G was, Subaru. And operators there that I remember were Ray Rice, Clint Olson, and Irv Norgland. Now, let's go out onto Highway 10, and here we have Big Five's new building. It's much bigger, built the way they wanted to. It had more bays. They end up with a cafe, and that's a truck stop as well. Eventually that was sold to Grover Company. Well, there's a couple other stations kind of hidden from sight. There was a Champlin on 34 and Highland Drive, and that was it was built new, had a very short shelf life. It was kind of a flash in the pan. And then we'll go to a Deep Rock station, and that was north of the mall in the Greystone parking lot. You remember that one, Milford? Right across from. Well, this one was on Highway 10 west, but we're talking about the Deep Rock station. Pay attention, will you? There was a Deep Rock station across from Kant's Garage, north of the mall, in the Greystone parking lot.
Milford's still trying to figure out why you couldn't put the cigarettes that Don did.
Ernie Hookey was the operator there. Now, let's have a word from our sponsor, Chapman Oil Company. If you've got mechanical pumps, they need to be serviced and they need to be repaired. Call Doug or Ronnie Chapman, and they're ready for fast service on pumps or on fresh tanks. Incidentally, Ronnie, even in this computer age, is still doing fuel or gas pump repair. Well, with all these stations, you have to think, are there any still standing? Well, of course there are. We have in Benders, that's at the north side, Skelly, that chiropractor. If you're in there, take a deep breath. Maybe you can smell some Skelly gasoline. Across the street is Northside Standard that Wisted's built. and that's Trophy House. And down at City Service, Pete is repairing foreign cars. Go down to Shorty's Cafe, well, that's Johnny's 66. But I don't know, I don't think they have the fish stores he had. If we go to Greg Hildebrand's to buy State Farm insurance, that's a standard station as well. Only M&H is still standing in the same spot. They had a little different concept now. It's a ho-hum, another convenience store, and of course the building is new. Holiday just built a new station on the 66 station on Frazee Street, and we have the Casey's that's near the Bose station, and we have Irv Colleen still smoking his pipe, still fixing cars at the Webb station. Well, we have a lot of brothers that were in these stations. Let's remember we have Carl and Morris Knutson. They spent their lifetime repairing cars or pumping gas. We had Cal and Kermit Scogan, Art and Elf Fingelson, Norman and Norbert Waltz. We had Roy and Joe Sauer, and we had Glenn and Lyle Bunnis. Well, you can't mention brothers without Arlo, Vern, and Al Block. Arlo spent his lifetime in stations. And of course, well, we have one of these men still in business, and that's Irv. He started at 13 years of age, working in gas stations. He's been in there, well, somewhere longer than 10 years. You might say he's the last man standing. Well, just prior to the 50s, Wally and Willie Schultz had a station in the Central Market area. And his daughter Ruth and his grandson Whitewell are still in servicing cars and selling tires. Well, how could all these stations last? How could they make a living? Well, the fact is, some of them didn't. But folks changed oil more often than they do now. And there was more service work on cars. Tires didn't last as long. They were bias ply. Some didn't go 10,000 miles. Sometimes you'll see a radial nowadays go 90,000 miles. And because of the carburetor, they would flood. They'd need to be jumped. They'd need to be pulled or pushed. And yes, you could pull automatic transmissions or push automatic transmissions until the early 60s when they took the second pump out of the transmission. Abe Bose sold a lot of AAA, and that a lot of people bought that back then because they needed their cars. People didn't have spare cars. They didn't have two cars. Many families had one car only. And of course, I guess we'd have to talk about gas wars. Well, every once in a while a gas war would start up, and I guess the lowest I ever heard of was 13.9. We had a few in Detroit Lakes. There were a lot more in Fargo-Moorhead. But my question is, how many stations were there? You did pretty good. There were 32 stations by this count. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Museum Roadshow, brought to you by Carvinens.